Hey guys, welcome back to another video in my Inferno Squad build series. I've got a good one for you today. Today I'm going to show you how I built my Inferno Squad helmet. So, the Inferno Squad helmet in the game is actually based off of the Rogue One style TIE Pilot helmet. It's a bit different to the original trilogy helmet. I got my kit from a maker called DA Props here in the UK. It started life as an original trilogy TIE Pilot kit, but it's been converted into the Inferno Squad helmet. It is made from a black acrylic capped ABS plastic, and they are vacuum formed over bucks to form the actual pieces. When I got the kit, it came with the faceplate, the two hemisphere halves, left and right, the two ear pieces, the trident piece, and a strip to make the mohawk. Now the first job was to trim up all these pieces. I went at it with some cutting shears and my Dremel. I had to trim away all the excess. With pieces like the hemispheres, you have to trim the edge back to its final point. This I kind of took off most of the material with the shears and then just ground it close with the Dremel. Same with the faceplate, I just had to remove the eyes. This is a little tricky, but there is actually a line on the inside which you can go to. It's quite difficult to do, but you know, if anyone's made a Stormtrooper or a TIE Pilot helmet in this traditional way, you have the same issue to deal with. The ears got trimmed back and the trident got trimmed back as well. The next step was to start assembly. Now with these ones you have to line up all the pieces and start working how they're going to fit together. With mine I started by gluing the two hemispheres together. So you glue each bit together with some little strips just to get the spacing right. This gives you your kind of form to work from. I then fitted the faceplate with screws. You have to drill through and just use screws and washers to attach it. The ears are attached in much the same way. You just have to locate the right place and then drill all the way through till you get it in the right place. This is actually the first sort of vacuum form kit I've put together. Like I said, if you have a Stormtrooper or a TIE Pilot helmet from the original trilogy, this is how they're put together. They are vacuum formed pieces which you have to cut out and trim and assemble. I decided to go for the original trilogy style because it's an easier one to obtain. I'm not too worried about it being that accurate to the game that it has to be the Rogue One style. I was just happy with it being, you know, a TIE Pilot helmet to start with, and then all I had to do was change it up a bit. The only difference is in the finishing, which I will show you in a little bit. Once all these pieces were screwed together, next came the arguably more tricky thing to do, which was gluing on the mohawk strip. This is the centerpiece of plastic that goes around the top and covers all your seam lines from the two hemispheres being put together. Now for this I used what a lot of people use, which is E6000 glue. It is a very strong glue. I recommend wearing a respirator when using it and use it in a well ventilated area, so it's not recommended to use inside, but if you have to do it, just try and open the windows, wear a respirator, whatever. So what I had to do was cut it to the right width. I already had the width set by those spacers in the helmet, so I cut the strip to the right width and then applied glue on the inside of the seams to glue it down. This glue takes about 24 hours to cure fully. So what you have to do is sort of secure it as you go. Some people use magnets, some people use clamps. The method I had seen, which I thought was pretty good, was using Gorilla Tape. Now Gorilla Tape is a very strong adhesive tape. So I applied glue and then glued the mohawk down in bits, taping it as I went, and then left it to cure. Now once I was sure the glue was cured, I could whip off the tape, clean off all the residue, and on the back we had a little tab that I was using to also help hold the helmet, but it's a bit of leftover plastic from the strip that sticks out. Now you could just trim this off, but to make that end look nice and clean, what I did was I heated it with a heat gun and folded it round the bottom of the helmet. This matches in with a lip that's on the bottom of the helmet, so you bend it round and then trim off the excess to match that lip, and it gives a very nice finish on that return edge. The return edge and the whole bottom of the helmet is covered in a trim. You can get different types of trim. There are different ones that are supposed to be accurate to different movies. I found some great stuff on eBay, which I just ordered, and it works great. It's a little different. It's got a slight pattern to it. It's a bit different to what you see normally, but what I found was when I tried to cut it, the trim I had actually had metal in it. So it's actually a very strong trim and adds really great structural support around the neck of the helmet, which is arguably the bit you're going to be picking up the helmet most by, you know, when you're kind of holding it or picking it up. So it's good to have that reinforced area around that neck opening. Next, before any assembly took place, I decided to paint the Mohawk strip. In the game, it's kind of unclear what color it is. It could be like a primer mid-grey kind of color, but I decided to go a bit more fun with mine. I decided to do more of a gunmetal-y color, so I whacked out my new airbrush and gave it a primer coat in a black, and then went over with a gunmetal color. This actually ended up being a little darker than I wanted it to be, so I actually had some aluminium airbrush paint as well, so I just mixed that in with it and went over it again, and it ended up being a much better colour, and I really like the colour that it ended up being. After the Mohawk was glued down, I was able to glue on the trident piece. Now you have to trim away some of the front of the hemispheres to get that trident piece to sit up at the right point where you want it. I kind of lined it up to where the top of those spheres meet. You trim away, and then what I found was I hadn't trimmed the lip of the pointy piece back far enough, so I had to go back in again and trim it flush, and then it glued down much easier once I'd done that. I was having real trouble getting it to stick down. Probably the most trouble I had actually assembling the helmet. After all the main helmet was assembled, next came the detailing pieces. There are a few different detail pieces all over the helmet which help kind of make it pop and kind of identify it as the TIE pilot helmet. One of the most obvious, I guess, is the metal greeblies on the ears. These are the same aluminium pulleys that are used throughout all of the Imperial uniforms, you know, on buckles, hats and everything like that. The kit came with 2 resin ones. The casts were okay, not great. I could have filled in the bubbles and painted them or whatever, but there are so many makers of these things that I just ordered some machined aluminium ones. They look so much better and they have that kind of real tactile feel to them. So these were just super glued onto the ears, and these cover up the bolts that go through the ears that hold the earpieces on. The screw for those wasn't sitting exactly flush with the plastic, because it can't, because the plastic isn't thick enough. So what I did was I countersunk the aluminium pieces a little bit, just so they sit over that screw, and it means they can sit really flush to the helmet. The other detail pieces are things like the mesh that go over the front. I had drilled out all the teeth on the front. This kind of helps with the airflow and also is accurate to what they have in the game. But there is a mesh behind there. So I already had some aluminium mesh, which I'd used for a previous build. So I stuck some tape on the inside and drew a pattern around where the teeth were, pulled this out, transferred it to the mesh. The mesh cuts pretty easily with scissors, so I just trimmed that out, and we had our piece. Because this is going near my face and the metal has really sharp edges, I had to kind of cover the edges of the mesh a little bit. So what I decided to do was use Gorilla Tape, and the one I had was a narrow width one, so even this one I trimmed in half and then folded around the edge, being sure to try and stick it to itself through the mesh. But this edges it very nicely, so it's not going to poke my face when my head is in there. This was then simply hot glued to the inside. One piece that wasn't included with the kit was anything to go on the front, because with a standard TIE pilot you have the 2 hoses which come out of the front which go to the chest box. Now there are scenes in Battlefront 2 where they have the hoses in, but what I wanted was to have the look that they have without them in, which are 2 little sort of aerator greeblies that go on the front. Now there aren't any makers for these, or we don't really know what they look like, so what I did was, using this reference that I captured from in-game, was whip up a 3D model quickly in 123D design. Just basically a set of stacked cylinders with a few tapers, and then they kind of taper back in the middle. So I whipped up the 3D model and then just sent it over to my 3D printer and printed them out. I printed out 2 in a silver PLA at about, I think it was a 0.05mm layer height, so it's quite fine detail, so I didn't want to do too much finishing on these. These were then painted with my airbrush. I used quite a few coats of a black microfiller primer just to try and fill in some of those layer lines, and once I was happy with that, I just went over with that same aluminium colour. For this one I used Old-Clad metal lacquers to get that aluminium finish, and it's a pretty good finish. You're never going to get that high polish, but it's a pretty close metal finish. These were then just glued on with a 5-minute epoxy and held down with a little bit of super glue just while that epoxy set. Before doing my final assembly of the helmet, it was time to paint the distinctive red markings that Inferno Squad have. For this, I went to my local auto store, which is a Halfords here in the UK. The kit came with 2 vinyl decals which were going to go on the top, and these were a specific type of red, so I took one of those with me to the shop and also was looking online paint references for the paints I was looking at that other people had bought. It's good to kind of cross-reference and try and gauge what the colour of the paint is actually going to be, because most of the the caps you get on the spray cans, they look pretty similar, and it's very hard to tell what the paint's actually going to look like. I kept going through till I found a red that I liked. You can see which one I chose here, and this is what I ended up using on the helmet. The area was masked off using a painter's tape. Before spraying the surface, I roughed it up using a high grit sandpaper. This just means that the paint's going to stick a lot better when going onto that really shiny surface, because the acrylic capped ABS is really shiny. Because I wanted the helmet to look battle worn, I wanted to do some very specific types of chipping. So for this I used a liquid latex. It's actually just a cheap Halloween latex that I have. I apply it with a barbecue skewer, or just any kind of stick, because it gives a really rough kind of application. I went along all the surfaces that I want to chip with this latex, and then once that was dry I just hit it with the red rattle can. The paint was a little bit thinner than I thought it was going to be, and in retrospect I should have done lots of little light coats. Because it's winter here and it's very cold, I didn't want to, there's no place I could just leave it in a clean environment where I work, so I had to spray it outside very quickly, then bring it back inside. I let it get to touch dry and then just applied another coat again. Once I'd let that fully cure overnight, it was time to peel off all the masking and reveal all our hard work painting. This was also the time that I peeled off all that protective cellophane cover on the plastic, ready for the final assembly. It was also time to peel off all that latex. This is really fun and satisfying, and if you do it, you'll see what I mean, but it's really fun just taking it off and revealing what you've done. I also went back in with a small needle file to kind of enhance some of these chips a little bit, make them look like scrapes, working on all the edges. I only really worked around the areas that I've painted because you can't really see it on any of the other areas, so I just went in and enhanced some of those chips a little bit with those needle files. I used a few different ones, a square one, a pointy one, just to get some natural looking scratches going across the paint job. One of the final jobs to do was to put on the 2 decals which I had for the top, which was the Inferno Squad logo and the Imperial logo. Now, when putting these decals onto a curved surface, obviously the stickers are straight, they're flat. So when you try and put them on a curved surface, I'm sure if you tried things like this, they tend to bunch up a little bit. So what you have to do, especially on the Imperial cog, is just cut from the middle all the way to the edge and then put that at the top. So when you squeeze the circle around the curved surface, they meet and then just go over ever so slightly at the back, and this means that the decal sits very flush with the surface of the curved helmet. The Inferno Squad one isn't so bad because there's not a lot of sticker and there's actually gaps at the top, so these just close up a little bit as you put it on, but the Inferno one sits much better. It's much easier to put on than the Imperial one. After that, it was time to weather up the helmet. For this I used a black chalkboard paint. It's like a blackboard paint. This I thought would contrast the sort of high gloss finish of the helmet, which I had already. I just went in on all the different areas, all the grooves, with quite a wet coat, but quite a thick coat as well, and then was just wiping it away with a paper towel. I did lots of passes of this. It works especially well working it into those chips and scratches, which I had done on the red paint. It looks really cool when the black is left in there. Other than that, it was just patiently going over the whole helmet. I chose some specific areas to add more of this black weathering, just to strategically break up the really gloss finish on the helmet. I also used it to cover some of my errors in masking. It's very handy to do that. The final job on this helmet was to install the lenses. I hadn't put these in before painting, just in case I'd got paint onto the lenses. They are acrylic bubble lenses. They're vacuum formed in quite a thick red acrylic plastic. I trimmed these out and then just glued them in. The vision in this helmet isn't great at all. Those bubble lenses are really hard to see through, and these being quite a thick plastic as well. I know vision in Stormtrooper helmets isn't great in general, but these make it a hell of a lot worse. If I find it's a problem in the future when I'm wearing it, I'll just swap them out for some flat red lenses and just sacrifice the look for a bit of visibility. And that was it. Our helmet was done, so here it is. So that was it. That was the build of our Inferno Squad helmet for our Inferno Squad costume. There are a few bits I still need to do on this helmet, which I will cover in future videos, which is the inside. So as you can see, there is no padding or anything on the inside, so I've got a few bits in mind to try for that, so that will be in an upcoming video. I've got a few more other videos as we finish other pieces of this costume, and they will be coming very soon. If you like what you saw, please don't forget to subscribe. Your support means a lot to me. Other than that, I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.